Okay, I have a minute after 6, so we do have a quorum, so why don't we get started on this, and we'll start with the minutes. And the first minutes we have are from the last meeting of November 17th. Are there any changes, discussion regarding these minutes? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
So moved.
Second? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. They're approved. Now we come to the special meeting minutes from December 3rd, and those are now open for comments, discussion, corrections. Okay.
Larry must have done a great job with the minutes.
Yeah, I have just one minor correction. On the first page, Lisa Feltner thought the target should be higher in both. And I made a comment that there's nothing preventing Watertown from achieving more than 15%. If that was the target, but I never said if that was the target. This indicates that maybe we should make the target more than 15%. That's not what I said. I said we can, basically we can overshoot the target. So if you could strike that, if that was the target.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything else? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of December 3rd?
Motion to approve the minutes of December 3rd special meeting.
Second.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second?
Second from Helen.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
These minutes are approved of December 3rd. Next, we move on to the housing plan. Larry, you have a report for us on that?
I do. Thank you, Fred. There's still some work to do, but all of it, I would say, is non-substantive. Obviously, you may choose tonight to make substantive changes, but let me outline what the things are that I think need to get done, loose ends, to have it ready for its submission to the town council. First, production. Laurel is doing a professional job of formatting and including images and cleaning up the appendices, including the SHI Appendix C. So she needs several more days to do that once we agree on text. Second, I'm cleaning up the text, especially things like acronyms. Fred made a number of suggestions that I'm going to incorporate to define things earlier in the paper and in some cases not use acronyms. And also there's things like cross-referencing that needs to be done and some minor wording comments that have been made. Third, on last Thursday, the Census Bureau released the 5-year estimates that cover the period ending in 2019. So that is the most data. And what I am starting to do is to plug in those numbers so that we are using the latest numbers whenever we can. So far that I've seen, there's nothing there that is going to change any conclusions. For the most part, it's very minor changes in percentages, remembering that this 5-year estimate is over the 5 years. So every year is just a little bit different than the one before. So those are the things that I think we could do that are non-substantive. There's been one comment that I think is arguably substantive that was made by David, and he can explain that. But otherwise, what I would propose, if you all are willing, is for you to discuss whatever substantive things you need to, and then if you're comfortable with this, moving to approve the plan, subject to my doing those things that I've outlined here, Steve and I and Laurel, so that you've got a finished product.
That
Okay,
sounds
you
like it.
you indicated David had a substantive change. Is
Yes,
that right?
but it is substantive and he can explain that.
Okay, so David, you want to explain that?
Sure. I apologize. I had sort of a late thought on just adding one word to in goal 3 strategy 3C. I don't know if folks have that in front of them, was just to add the word so it would read enter into the partnerships with supportive service providers to create. I was going to suggest the word housing opportunities rather than just create housing opportunities, and add the word flexible, because I think one of the issues that's challenges for developing housing for folks with disabilities, particularly those with developmental disabilities, just is sort of not a one size fits all, and just just calls for flexibility in developing the housing. So my suggestion was to maybe add that word to describe it. So it would read create flexible housing opportunities. It's not, it's not earth shattering, but just
No, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
I can
sounds
see
good
your
to me.
point. Yeah, I can see your point.
Further discussion on this?
I'm in support.
Anyone not in support? Yeah, I think that change then is fine for everyone. Any other discussions on this or things that need to be changed? Anything last minute besides just spelling corrections or something? Okay. Any discussion about Larry's suggestion that we approve the plan as it stands, with the understanding that a few things are going to be done to cross-reference and clean it up before it goes to the town council?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm in favor.
Yeah.
Could you speak up, please?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm in favor.
Okay.
I
Any
agree.
other-
I agree. I think it would move us along, and I don't see a reason to delay this further. I'm not sure that we would gain anything by bringing it back to us.
Good.
Agreed, and looks great so far. Just thanks again. I know we keep reiterating it, but thanks again to Larry. It's going to be a great final product.
Okay, anyone else? Do we have a motion to approve it with the understanding that some minor corrections will be made?
a move.
I'll second.
Okay. In favor of it, David?
Yes.
You're-
Are you going to do a roll call?
Yes.
Thank you.
David, are you in favor?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Cliff?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Did I miss anybody?
Just yourself.
It's approved.
Right.
So now we can move on to the rental assistance program. Again, Larry, you have some information for us for this?
I do, thank you. And I am expecting Jennifer. She said that she would jump on around 7:10 to 7:15. But I think I can summarize where she is, based on the report that I provided you that she wrote. And then she'll arrive in time to answer any questions you may have. So 44 households are currently enrolled in the program, with 17 of them having entered in October. And as a result, this is the last month of their receiving assistance. The report that Jennifer provided gives you a flavor of why people needed assistance. And in particular, providing you with a sense of what their employment situation is, and their, the specific difficulty that COVID is providing. It also provides information about, things like the demographics of the enrollees and the household, with the bedroom configurations and how much of the rent this assistance is helping with. At this point, if we just continue with the program as you adopted, using the $175,000 the same way it has been, and just accepting applications on a rolling basis and not extending any of those who have received assistance. We would end the program approximately in April, having helped somewhere around 55 households. The option one that I had on the spreadsheet is just designed to give you the specifics of what would happen if all you did was let this round run out. In order to give you options for a second round, I'm going to walk through what Steve and I did. I first ran a number of scenarios with no limit on the dollars. So just what were some of the ways in which this program could unfold in the second round. And the main variables were whether we extended people or not. That is the people who had reached the limit of 3 months. How many months we extended them for, whether we accepted new households, whether we then extended those new households after the 3 months ended, and then the different levels of demand, because we've got a track record so far of how much demand there is, but we don't know, whether that's going to change in the future. So looking at some of the possibilities there. Those various scenarios at the upper end, the scenario that was the most robust would call for $300,000 more and would eventually help 75 households, but it would do that for a full 6 months. I obviously have the information on all those different scenarios, but in conversations within the department, what we concluded was that it made the most sense to focus on and be cognizant of the scarcity of the affordable housing resources that the Housing Partnership has, and therefore consider the role of other funding sources. One of those being the state programs that could help Watertown residents. The RAFT and IRMA programs that DHCD has created because of COVID-19 have the potential of providing $4,000 per household for those who are eligible. And that could make our funds go farther if households that had a long-lasting need were to take our resources, but then also be able to use the state funding. The RAFT program is for households below 50% of AMI, whereas the IRMA program is for those under 80%. In both cases, it fits within our program because ours is below 80%. The downside of RAFT and IRMA so far has been the level of documentation and review by DHCD, and therefore or I shouldn't say directly by DHCD, but the providers who are being supervised by DHCD. And therefore the backlog involved. What we heard earlier in the fall is that it took 2 to 3 months for a household to go through the process of applying, being vetted, and then getting assistance. In addition to the state funding, there's obviously the possibility of CPA funds. And at this point, the Community Preservation Committee looks like it will open up sometime in the spring for applications. And it is certainly conceivable that if there is a compelling need and a strong application for use of CPA funds for this kind of assistance, that could be another source of money that would allow the affordable housing money to be augmented in the future by some other source that would stretch out the available resources. So given those other funding sources, and given the fact that currently CDBG funding, that we have a balance of 136,000, once you take into account the full commitment for the 175, what's been dispersed plus what has been committed, that we felt comfortable with proposing 100,000. It's important to leave some reserve because CDBG is the most flexible affordable housing resource. So it's good to have that around if there is something we need to use it for in a short period of time and want to be able to act quickly. So with 100,000 as the target number, I ran scenarios that fit within that. And the recommendation that we have is what's called option 3. And then there were 2 other options that went in different directions to give you a sense of, what your different ways you could approach things. So the recommendation or option 3 is one that has the opportunity for families that are, or households that are currently in the program to extend, but only for 2 months. It then continues to allow new applicants to come in, so there can be the pipeline that's already existing or new applications can be fit in within it. Option 2 and option 3 are different in that one of them basically says we're going to focus on new applications only, and the other one focuses on the people who are already in the pipeline. And those are both reasonable ways of going, but we like the option 3 as a way of approaching things. And as a final note, option 3 would allow us to address the issue that we've talked about several times, which is the Watertown Housing Authority households, because they would be new applicants, and under option 3, we'd be able to consider those people. And Michael has provided information about the extent of assistance that's expected there. And what he has told me is that 5 households are presently are ones they've identified. And it looks to me, based on our program requirements, that if we provided assistance over the course of 3 months to them, that it would be somewhere in the vicinity of 15,000. So it could fit within an option 3 and still allow us room to accept other people who are coming in entirely new. So I see that Jennifer has joined us. I don't know if you've been able to hear everything, but if there are any additional things that you'd like to add to my report before the members discuss, or Steve, if you want to say anything.
I just said I appreciate both all the work that Jennifer's done to, serve all the households that we've, served so far. And, I think they've done a tremendous job of vetting applicants and, going through the paperwork and the process of getting them the checks that they so desperately need. I think there are a lot of trade-offs and a lot of potential directions this could go. I think the option that Larry and I are suggesting in terms of option 3, at least from my perspective, tries to strike the best balance of providing assistance to people and not unnecessarily penalizing anybody. The one last thing I guess I'll mention is, as Larry mentioned, we could potentially serve some of the families in the housing authority. And, I think having discussed it to some extent with Michael previously, I think it does make sense to, the idea that the RAF program was providing the assistance that they needed just simply hasn't borne out. To the extent that it is providing assistance, it's not meeting the need, and for the vast majority of people, they're waiting months to even get answers. And I think the very nature of this being an emergency rental assistance program makes sense for us to provide some assistance to those people that are in need now, and so I would recommend that we do allow them in. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, or Jennifer, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, Jennifer, do you want to add to this?
I do not think I have anything to add. I think Larry and Steve have obviously put a lot of thought into this, and I think it makes good sense.
Okay, let me just ask you, Jennifer, to make sure I have this right. It's my understanding that the program that we have embarked on and made a few minor changes in is put together by CHAPA for the purpose of employing CPA funds to prevent eviction of people who become unemployed, or in other words, in need because of the virus. Now, having said that, my feeling would be it would be very nice if the CPA were to function, and that would be the funding that would be available in Watertown to prevent evictions. I'd like to open it to everyone else for comments on, I guess, option 3, and also how much funding we should put into this. And should we be extending people for 3 months at a crack, or should we go month to month? We have a lot of options here, And I'd just like to open this up for discussion.
I might just say one thing on that, is we do need to charge a recertification fee, assuming there is some recertification process. So I would definitely advise against any kind of month-to-month thing, unless we're just going to automatically enroll people month to month. Then we obviously would not have to charge anybody anything. We would do that for free. But if we're going to have some kind of recertification process, if people are going to provide documents, if we've got to, issue another stamp of eligibility, then we would charge $50 per household. So just, keep that in mind. I think it's been factored into these scenarios, but I would not encourage by any stretch of the imagination month to month that also requires recertification. So just wanted to say that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just touch on the CPC or CPA funds for a moment. I think there's a limited number of dollars we have available for affordable housing. I think the use of CPA dollars that are, associated with affordable housing, we're going to sort that out and figure out what best to spend it on as that program proceeds. It's not approving projects yet, not in a position to approve projects yet. That probably won't be till sometime in the new year. So I don't think it makes sense for us to try to figure out how to use those dollars just yet. Our recommendation with option 3 was to use another 100,000 from the CDBG funds that we have available. And I guess in my mind, I wouldn't think of it necessarily as, well, we should not use these funds, we should use CPA funds, or vice versa. There's a limited number of dollars that are going to go to affordable housing. This is one of the sources that's available to us right now, whereas CPA is not. So I'd just recommend that if we decide to do that, let's decide how much money we're willing to put in the program and do that, and not worry about CPA at this point.
Do we have any more comments, discussion?
Yeah, you can hear me. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I was muted. I'm looking at the handout from Larry. I'm trying to understand all the numbers. So if we look at option 3, it's extend enrollees 2 months, then take new applications. So you're assuming that 40 households would remain in the program and receive a total of 5 months worth of assistance. How many households do we have enrolled currently?
44.
I'm sorry?
44.
So you assume that a few of them will drop out. Then you're
Right. Jennifer can speak to this, but based on her experience in surrounding communities, we were using 90% as the benchmark.
yeah. Okay. And the 10% that did drop out, is that because their income has improved, or because they move, or combination of reasons, variety of reasons?
Yeah, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
New jobs. A lot of people have moved. I'm not
Okay.
sure, it's impossible to predict with any real certainty who will come through, but
Yeah.
it's
Just
just a
made an
best guess.
assumption, right? It's just an
Right.
assumption that 10% would,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you have to make some assumption. I understand that. And then you're projecting 16 more households would enroll for the full 3 months. How many, I think it was said earlier in this piece of paper, document, how many you have that are still in the process? So you've got 18 that are incomplete or still in the process.
Yes.
So are you assuming that we'll receive any new applications, or is this really just dealing with the pool that we have currently?
So it's assuming that we're going to receive new applications. The 18 includes people who have been in the process for a very long time, and they may never come out of the process.
Okay. All right.
they're not folded into the 16 in any way.
Well, they are, but only a certain percentage of them.
So you're assuming that we'll get a fully limited number of additional applications if that's the case. That seems to be implicit in this.
Well, it would be continuing where we've been, which is 1 to 2 applications a week, and then
Okay,
a certain percentage of those enroll.
okay. Okay, so that's projecting for the numbers based on experience.
Yeah,
Okay, so then if, under this scenario, we'd expend $77,000 over the next 3 months, is that what you're saying?
as long as it's 3 months, it's until May.
I'm sorry, that broke up. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, it's until May or through May.
So it'd be $77,000 additional expenditure through May?
Yes.
And how much have we expended so far?
Excuse me?
How much have we spent so far?
89,000 has been dispersed.
Okay,
And then there are commitments for people who are in the program who've not gotten money yet,
okay.
or have not gotten all of their money.
So
And actually,
totals what?
if I can add one other thing, the 77,000 projection is based on the assumptions we've been discussing. There's
Yeah.
a gap between 77,000 and 100,000. And we're comfortable with that because we don't know that it's only going to be 16 households. And so there's an upside there if it gets worse. And if everything goes, brilliantly with the economy, maybe, we'll be, somewhere below that or at that number. But if the economy gets significantly worse, it could easily be above 77,000.
Yeah, no, I understand. You're leaving a little wiggle room, which is a good idea. So then under that scenario, our total commitment would be 275,000. And I'm assuming the entire original 175 will be spent.
Yes.
So we would spend somewhere between 250 and 275 total, depending on how the numbers work out. For the people that would be in the program for just 2 additional months, given where things are at with the pandemic, I have a hard time imagining that their economic status will improve in 2 months' time, maybe 3 or 4 months' time, but not 2. Are we going to offer them any assistance to apply for RAFT or other state-funded programs? It seems like if they want to take advantage of those based on what you're saying, Larry, they should probably be starting now, today, and not waiting till a month before the money runs out from us.
So I invite Jennifer to expand on this, but my understanding is that Metro West has been informing applicants of the possibility of doing IRMA and RAFT. And I think one thing that's clear is that she and I should do some further, or there should be further work to make clear that option, help people apply, so that even for those people who we're not going to be able to extend for, they've got something in process that is extend beyond 2 months. They've got something in process, and so there is work to something.
I mean, I would hate to see us having helped these folks through a jam and then we come to the end of what we can give them and they end up losing their housing anyway. Several more months where they were is a good thing, but I'd like to see them be able to stay in their homes if that's what they're choosing to do. So I think that's, I don't know how you factor that in here, but I would hope to see that we're able to do that. Who is the regional provider for RAFT and IRMA in our area?
Metro Housing.
Okay.
Cliff, we're having the Belmont program is ending this month. They're considering a 1-month extension, but it's unlikely. So we're the Belmont Housing Trust and us, Metro West, are going to co-host a training and meeting on Thursday night to encourage people to apply. And Chris Norris from Metro Housing is going to come and give a presentation. So we'll know if that works. If there's 3 people at the meeting, then okay, maybe this isn't going to work so well.
Yeah.
If there's 40 people at the meeting, then maybe we're on to something. So I can certainly share how that rolls out.
I'd be curious to hear.
Do we have any other comments on this?
Just that if you come out of that meeting, Jennifer, with a solid contact with the active raft case manager, please let us know. It's they've got a lot of funds these days, but I'm aware that I think Chris will probably back me up that they're overwhelmed with applications and they're struggling to get caseworkers even to handle all that work. So if you've got a strong point of contact, that'd be very helpful for us too.
Michael, while you're speaking, you have asked about expanding the program so that public housing people can apply. How is that going? Are we going to be adding more people from public housing? And what does that do to the numbers?
I think to what Larry said earlier, you know, at this time, I think in terms of eligibility, where we're confident they would be eligible for the program, there's, you know, where they're impacted economically from COVID-19 and not things prior to March, 5 families still that have not received sort of funding through other means. And I think it's 3 bedrooms, 2 2-bedroom, all families, no elderly, and totaling about 15,000, but shouldn't be something that breaks the bank in terms of this round of funding. And there might be other applicants. You know, we've tried to get the word out as much as we can as far as whether there's a need. Not saying that, you know, this application is forthcoming because we didn't have the timeline, but there might be more families that we see come forward that have said that they've had an economic impact as a result, even after the adjustment. They just spent poorly, they didn't budget right, it was really tight, they had an accident, all the little things. I was reading, you know, the reasons that people are needing access to emergency rental assistance on what Jen prepared, and not that it was great. You know, it summarizes very well all these different things. Full-time Uber drivers, position was terminated very last second, and the adjustment is, you know, 1 month behind, and they were earning $1,000. Now they're $700 behind. So we might have a few more come forward, but at this time, just 5 families that we're aware of.
Michael, if I might ask about that,
Sure.
just so I understand the source of the shortfall for your families. These are people who, you said that, you know, their income dropped and they were not able to recertify in time to avoid paying the higher rent based on their older income. So they have this gap they've never been able to cover.
There was a few that sort of fell in the gaps, a few that didn't have the documentation, and then a couple that honestly just tried, I think, when we actually weren't allowed to increase their rent for about 4 months. From March until August, DHCD gave us that flexibility with any rent increases. We could give the benefit of the doubt to the resident, which was great. But at August, they had to owe, you know, whether it was unemployment or whatever increased their income, they owed us that 30%, and they couldn't get to that amount.
I see.
You know, they tried to put their best foot forward. It was 60% of rent, and the next month it was 40%. And so we start the meetings and see what's going on. But as you can imagine, it's there's a lot of valid reasons as to why they're struggling to pay the rent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. The thought that I have on is not should we extend or not extend. I think I would definitely want to extend, but the concern is that we extend for, say, 3 months for people that are already in the program and take the pressure off making applications for other funding. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not quite sure I understand. Are you suggesting that if we extend people for 3 months, they would not be inclined to apply for RAFT during that period?
I think
Other-
that's a
or other sources?
possibility, yes.
Okay.
We need some way to have people apply for more funds. Whether it's a program to help them apply for the funds, which Jennifer is certainly participating in it right now, or we limit the funds to certifying they've applied, something like that. Because at some point in time, I mean, we've got $100,000 we're gonna throw at this, and then we're out of money. Then what do we do? That would be the concern. I'd love for the CPA to get up and running and be able to participate, but I don't think we can count on that happening in time. And the vaccination and the virus going away and all that, I mean, it's not going to happen quickly.
So what about combining one of the things you just said? What about, I mean, I agree, just looking at the calendar, 2 months gets you to the end of February, which is not going to be very much better. 3 months gets you to the end of March, which might be better with, spring plus more vaccination. So, but then just based on what you said, Fred, what about, I know this wasn't one of the options. What about sort of 2 months, sort of as of right with the initial recertification that Jen does, and then, with an option of a third month without recertification by Jen, but if you can show that have an application in process with one of these other state sources. So it can go up to 3 months of our money, but there's an incentive to apply elsewhere. And that third month, that sort of month-long option doesn't require additional recertification and additional fee.
Any thoughts on that? I think it's a good idea.
It sounds like a good idea. Let me I understand with Jennifer, are you saying the folks that we're extending sort of the 2 months, or whether we end up doing a third month, do you need to recertify those, you're saying, for a fee, or only the new intakes?
So I would be happy to not recertify people and therefore not charge a $50 fee. So, meaning that people just get enrolled, right?
For the people already in there, you mean?
Right, people who are already in it, yeah. Most communities are choosing not to just automatically enroll people and are requiring a recertification of some kind for sort of political reasons. Which I'm not poo-pooing. I can see it either way. There's value in either direction here.
Jen, could you characterize a little bit how your view of people applying for RAFT or other assistance? Is your sense that people are doing that and it's just taking a long time for them to get processed, or they're not because they're getting this assistance, or
daunting to deal with?
We actually have no idea.
Okay.
We could certainly, email people and try to get some feedback on that. It's a burden. I mean, applying is a burden. And so my guess is people who got the funding through the town have not applied for RAFT, only because it's a lot of work. But my general opinion and belief that most people put their heads in the sand until the very last moment, sadly. So I think whatever the partnership decides, we do want to communicate that pretty clearly and say the clock is running out. It's time to apply it to other places. And I'm not sure, Larry, because I came a little late, if you describe the research process that we have done in other places. We've been talking about recertifying and we haven't actually described that. So what we
cover, so go ahead.
So what we've done in Newton so far is to be eligible for an extension, people have to sign an affidavit that says they're still below 80% of area median income, and they have to provide one of two possible eligibility requirement documents. One is that they are still unemployed or underemployed. So if somebody's still collecting unemployment assistance, or if somebody is only working 8 hours a week and they can give us a pay stub that shows that. Or maybe they're back to work full time, but are in rent arrears. So, they kind of got in a hole over the summer and fall. They're back to work, but they still need help to prevent eviction, basically. So the recertification process really just boiled down to two pieces of paper, the affidavit and either unemployment or a pay stub or a rent arrear letter. Now, obviously, we can do something different here in Watertown, but that's what we've been doing in Newton.
Jen, how many of the communities you've been working with are not giving any extension?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Steve. The town of Easton also undertook a very similar recertification process. So Newton has actually offered 2 extensions. So they have people who are now going to be going into their 7th month of assistance. Easton has had one extension. So people are getting 6 months of assistance. Belmont, as I just mentioned, is considering a 1-month extension. But, almost everybody, to Helen's point, you kind of get to this moment and you say, oh, well, nothing's really changed. Most people who got laid off, a lot of them are in industries that just aren't hiring people back. So we, as Larry said earlier, we're seeing a pretty high recertification rate.
I'm sorry, I just had an additional question there, not to use it as the be-all end-all source for all the other towns, but I was just, curious, what did they see as sort of the end game here? I know a lot of us are saying we got to play it by ear and we'll do rounds of funding, but as you're saying, nothing's changing. And so are they saying, maybe these people move because their lease ends and, they're out of the contract, they can afford a cheaper lease? What are people saying as far as the eventual displacement, I guess, that's going to be happening if these people can't get their jobs back or get their income back?
Yeah, I mean, if I were the governor, I'd be building homeless shelters because I don't know what's like, honestly. We're also, the lottery agent for a lot of affordable housing throughout Eastern Massachusetts, and landlords are not leasing to people who are collecting unemployment, right? So if you're unemployed, you can't move there because no one will take you, right? A landlord is not going to sign a lease with a tenant who has no real source of income. So I don't know, like, to answer your question.
I think on maybe a slightly more positive. At least my hope and expectation is that, with the spring, with vaccines, the spring, early summer, we get back to some sort of normal where, people are hiring again and people are getting jobs again and restaurants are opening again. And I think the question is, how effective can we be at keeping people housed between now and then? That's really, in my mind, the question.
Comment and a question. I happened to see a presentation today by apartments.com, economic presentation on the state of the country and the housing market. And one of the things that struck me is that they don't think that we're going to reach the same employment level we were at pre-pandemic until sometime in 2023, and there'll probably be slower growth thereafter. So we may be in for a long ride here. Which leads me to the next couple of questions. So let's say we're to take up Helen's suggestion that we give people, say, I think it's 2 months for the recertification and a 3rd month if they can show that they've applied for funding elsewhere and are presumably pursuing it in a reasonable way. That could add another 40 months worth of rent to the program. What would the economic cost of that be, the financial cost? And do we have the money to do that? And do we want to do it? And then taking it a step further, given what we're hearing about the difficulty of obtaining other funds, maybe that should be one of the requirements of an extension altogether, is that we'll give you 2 months more, 3 months more, but we have to see that you've started the application process somewhere else because we don't want to see you thrown out in the street because we can't give you any more after this. Because frankly, it doesn't really sound like we have additional money to provide after this second round.
May I
I
make
see
a suggestion?
Steve's shaking his head, maybe yes, maybe no.
May I make a suggestion?
Sorry, Mark, to cut you off, but I'll let you go next. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily all the funds that we have available. I do think, obviously, we need to be very judicious about it and very careful about it. I think there are some other avenues we might want to consider. And, as Fred said, the CPA is certainly one that's a potential, but I think there are some additional affordable housing funds that we have that we could consider too, if it is, a little bit to get us over the hump or something like that. There, I think that's still room for conversation. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One suggestion I might have is rather than the 2 months and then a 1 month conditional extension, you might think of doing a sort of sliding payments that you'd pay 100% of what they would normally see the first month, and maybe it would go down to 80% the third month. It might go down to 50%. That's another alternative. Let me also talk a little about the CPA funds. I mean, the way things are going now, we'll have an application process, if we're lucky, going maybe in the spring. Then we receive applications. Then we vet the applications. That might take a long process. And then even if we were to approve applications, we then have to go to the town council to get approval. So I think that's a fairly long time period. So if you're going to look for CPA funds, gosh, I don't see that happening till late summer, very, very earliest.
Mhm. This is exactly my concern. We're going to use all the available funds, and we're going to come to a point where nothing has changed with the unemployment situation, and we're out of funds, and we're going to have a number of people evicted because we have no funds to keep them in their homes.
Well, that's certainly a possible outcome. I think we ought to continue to work to try and prevent that as best we can. But not for nothing, but there are communities that aren't providing any emergency rental assistance. There are some that have provided it and are cutting it off. So I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much for, if we get to the point where we are not able to continue providing emergency rental assistance. I think we're doing a lot for a lot of people now, and ought to appreciate that. And again, continue to look for avenues to address those needs. And I'll, spend some time with Larry, and we'll make sure we turn over every rock that there is, and make sure that we know what we have available and what the process is for accessing funds as we get there. But let's deal with this
Right.
a better term, this lump of money that we're talking about tonight.
Yes,
So what-
and in light of the time, I wonder if we could maybe cut down on the discussion and move forward and come up with some sort of a proposal.
Fred, can I just clarify what the balance is on that first 175? It looks like the 89, the 32 that's either encumbered or going to be dispersed, that's 121, and then the administrative fee, what does that bring us to?
Right, we have 74,000 that is still in the Watertown account. And the rest of it has either been dispersed or it is lined up for people in who are current enrollees.
So 101 has been spent?
I think that the number that, 89 has been spent, plus
And the administrative costs, just what's left?
Yeah, I think you're right that we're around 100,000, 101,000 that has been spent. And then there are some funds that are being held by Metro West. and are committed for the January payments.
And
So
on-
we're more than halfway through the money, basically.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, was there a distinction on the cost for recertification on the new people and if we went with option 3, is there a different cost per household for the two?
Yes.
What was that again?
Right. $350 for someone who's
New,
walking in for the first time.
yeah, and $50,
$50 for an extension.
is that the streamline extension that Jen was talking about where it's an affidavit and an unemployment check kind of thing?
Yeah.
There's
Well-
also the option that Jen suggested of not recertifying and just extending them, which costs nothing.
If we were to extend for, say, 1 month without doing any recertification, and then require recertification, the $50 cost, and the evidence that they've made application for other funding.
Well, let me ask one other question while you guys are thinking about that. Jen, that 10% reduction, I assume we wouldn't have a 10% reduction of existing enrollees if we just extended them.
Unless they've moved, right, and they're no longer living there, then yeah, that number would probably be smaller, or that percentage would be smaller.
I mean, it'd be closer to the 44 if you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, I think I understand it's probably not Jen's favorite part of her job, but I think having the recertification probably does make sense at some point. Just the question is when, I guess.
Yeah.
And also to Helen's point of when do you want to, push more on the application to other programs? I think because, the reports of applications taking months, not a single month, but multiple months to be processed, I think it would make sense to push for that application to other programs sooner rather than later.
May I make a suggestion? I think that Steve might be right about that. I think, looking at what we're talking about, I would suggest that we do the recertification, that as part of the recertification process, we require people to show they've applied for additional funding if they need it, or if they're new applicants to the program. Now, Michael's people may not need that additional assistance. This may be a one-time situation for them where they have a gap that will not recur. And there may be other people in a similar situation who are in other kinds of subsidized units, perhaps. Jim would know, I don't. But I think it's a good idea. I think taking up where Helen left off. On the one hand, I'm kind of reluctant to say to folks who are already having a very difficult time, well, you must go and do this and to take care of yourself, because I feel it's a little bit nanny state-ish. On the other hand, I really am afraid that, as Jennifer points out, people are just going to be paralyzed by the situation that they're in. And they're going to get to the end or close to the end of the funds that we are going to be able to provide. And they're going to start looking around and realize that unless they've got a landlord who's willing to wait for 2 or 3 months, if they're lucky, they're going to be on the street by the end of 2 or 3 months instead. And I really hate to see that happen to people if there's a way to avoid it. And it sounds like for all its faults, with their processing time, RAFT and other programs could provide a way to solve this problem for people. Because personally, I don't see the economy getting back to anything approaching normal until next summer or maybe even next fall.
I'll just add something, Cliff, about RAFT, that we're aware that they are not going to move your, application to the front of the line, which they do prioritize certain ones if they don't feel like your eviction is imminent. Now, with the eviction moratorium up, and a lot of people without that CDC waiver, they're moving people to the front of the line, to our understanding, which can be a little frustrating because unless you threaten them with not even, bringing them into court for a hearing on the arrears. We're talking they had an agreement for judgment or something, and now they're in breach of it, and now it's execution time. They're about to be on the street, and so just that little bit about RAFT. And there's, I think, something that I want to just add about the accountability aspect for our own residents, because we kind of try to help as much as we can to get them funding sources, but we're also still the property manager. You know, we have to make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that we
Yeah.
we hold them accountable. And so I think in this program, you know, it's certainly far from being in vain. This is a great amount of money for a town that's relatively small in comparison to the neighbors, and yet we have this second extension. So if you're able to, in my opinion, just as Helen said, incentivize them, really push and say, this is probably your, you know, last opportunity to take full advantage of this. Make sure that you're applying to other things, then we can extend you on our program a little bit longer, but then that's it. You know, you need to, you know, people like you said, kind of clam up and get nervous and they don't do anything. Well, you know, we've done everything we can. You know, it's a great program.
Yeah.
It's a good amount of money. And at that point, if they do end up on the street, that would be truly unfortunate, but we've done a good amount of stuff before then. You know, there's nothing you can do, I think, at that point.
If I could just throw out
No, I
some.
agree. I just,
Oops.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Jennifer.
I just wanted.
I'm mostly agreeing with Michael.
I wanted to put some logistical reality around this moment. So it is December 15th, and the first group of people are done. So if we're going to recertify them, we're going to need to do it now as we head into the holiday season. So I think we really don't want to require a raft submission and a recertification during the Christmas break. If, you know, obviously, if that's what you tell me to do, I will go try and do it, but it will be hard and we will not be super successful. So friendly amendment would be kind of maybe back to where Helen started, which was, you know, you get the first month by recertifying with our program, you get the second or the third month after you show evidence of a raft submission. Yeah, now's just a bad time to try to do anything.
So January 1st on, they would have to have the application for RAF.
No,
No.
you say, I like Helen's also, original proposal, basically. I think it's hard for me, as Cliff alluded to shove people down something that I don't know how onerous it is, and to, you know, certainly not by January 1st. And I think it's reasonable just to incentivize them for the third month on the extending the enrollees, you know, if they want the third month to have applied. But I don't think putting that requirement any earlier than that, I find I'm a little hard not knowing what's involved. And it sounds like it's been you know, sending people to the lions a little bit. You know.
Right. Of course, if they go through 2 months of extension and do nothing, and then they make application, it's not going to be in time. That's the downside of what you're saying.
I know, but you know, we can't control for everything, but you know, just, you can't.
Yeah.
Either help people, but you can't, you can't, you know, even though it's in their interest to do it, it's, you know, I don't know. I have a hard time imposing that unless it's a reasonable lead time or whatever for folks to get it together.
So we're back to giving them 2 months and they don't get the third month
That's
until
my
they have
particular
some
Helen's
evidence
proposal, yeah.
of moving, which is Helen's original proposal.
Yes.
We're running out of time right now. So how about if we actually get a motion to do something?
Make a motion
Well-
for Helen's original plan, unless you want to make that motion, Helen, sorry.
Well, actually, I was going to ask a question because, you know, I like my proposal, but I also want to, I want to just take a look at the numbers quickly.
That's
Larry
what I would say.
Larry and Steve kind of making eyes at this situation. So I think, you know, so the idea is that, you know, you wouldn't automatically get 3 months, but if you assume that maybe half, you know, would meet that criteria of showing evidence of applying for RAFT, then you get somewhere between option 3 and option 4 in terms of cost? Well, so I guess the question is, if we do this 2 months plus an option for a third month, what do we say about whether or not we accept new applications? Because I think, as much as I want to do it all, I think if you give an option for a third month and take new applications as assumed in option 3, then you end up with more than $100,000. So
What's the assumption?
Well-
I thought it was Cliff's thing was sort of back, it was saying 40 months using that thing. So what, say it would be 20 months at how much? Are we assuming?
well, I'm just looking at option 3 versus option 4 on the original, options that were distributed. I mean, basically,
Well, but let me,
Well, explain those numbers. I'm not following what.
because I think one difference that we would see with your option, Helen, is that if we're going to require that people apply for raft, two things are going to happen. Some people are going to get it, in which case, hopefully they would fall off of our rolls. And then 2, some are not going to want to go through that process of applying for raft and they'll drop out. So I think the, maybe unintended consequence of your proposal is, that the number of original applicants would probably decrease. So it wouldn't be as big a financial burden as we projected for option 4.
Okay.
But
So
I don't
may
think
I just,
we really know exactly how big a difference that would be.
yeah, I mean, I think we can't project exactly how it's going to end out. I guess I think what we need to decide, though, is that if we're going to offer the option of more than 2 months, that's conditional, are we also going to allow additional applications and just hope that, it'll shake out such that $100,000 is the right amount? And it might, from what you're saying, there's these different factors that go different ways. Or are we going to think that it's going to be too much and so we need to clamp down on new applicants? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and I think at that point, we would probably come back to you and say, we need to stop taking new applicants, or we need to find another source of dollars. And we could come back to you and pose those 2 options to you. Or not if we don't have other options. That's possible too.
Yeah, I would just add to that we can keep that, we can keep giving people the link to the online application as long as all of the materials say, funds are available until fully dispersed, so we're not advertising that there's a promised support, but by continuing to receive those applications, it lets us gauge demand and establish whether or not we need more funds, that kind of thing. So I would discourage, at least for right now, a hard stop on the applications. Let's at least get through January and February and see where we're at.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you take me through option number 4? I'm not sure I follow those numbers. What was the assumption there on the 45? In other words, instead of the 44 households, we'd have 45. What was that 45 refer to?
So it refers to everyone who is currently in the program.
Would re-enroll plus one other person?
Well, it includes a certain percentage from the pipeline.
Well, isn't it just one? Because it wasn't 44.
It's not one, because under option 3, the estimate was that some people would not extend. So it's really.
Okay, I get it. Okay, so and what's the 5 refer to then? They would be just, if there are no new applicants, what's the 5 refer?
Those would be the people who would not extend for the, so it's the difference between 40 and 45. So it's those 5 would only have done 3 months.
Oh, so only 5 of them, they wouldn't extend, 5 of them wouldn't extend beyond the first 3 months?
Exactly.
Okay.
they wouldn't extend because they wouldn't be able to recertify for whatever reason.
Right.
Or didn't need it, presumably, possibly.
That would be a reason not to recertify. Yeah.
So given what Steve said about, either, and what Jen said, we qualify the language saying limited funds available until they run out, and Steve saying, whether we monitor it and or we try and scratch around for some, other little source of money to tie us over. I'm willing to roll the dice on 3, that Helen's proposal on 3,
So,
Okay. That proposal then also needs to include adding the extra $100,000 in
Yeah.
when we make the actual motion.
Right.
so can I summarize what I think we're talking about? That we would ask the town to appropriate another $100,000 from the CDBG funding toward the rental assistance program for pandemic assistance, emergency pandemic assistance. People who are currently in the program will need to be recertified.
Streamline,
I'm sorry?
just a streamline
A
research.
streamlined recertification. They would receive 2 months additional assistance. They would receive a 3rd month if they can show they've applied for RAFT or a similar type of assistance. We would also allow new applications up until the point where we think we've exhausted our funding commitment. If we think if Jennifer thinks we're going to exceed that with the people we have in the program, presumably she would go back to Steve and Larry and they would root around to find some bags of cash under their desks for us to.
Under the tree behind Steve, I think.
Yeah, that's where I thought he was going to look, actually. So, and I think that provides the 3rd month extension if a household is applying for RAFT. It keeps it open to new applications until we think we've committed funds. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I hope that we'll be seeing applications at least not increasing over this time period. I'm just worried that with the gridlock in Washington, we may see it get worse, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there.
If there's one implicit point, which is opening it up to housing authority tenants.
Oh, yes, and opening up the housing authority.
Right,
tenants.
housing authorities included.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did not mean to slight Michael's people.
Right. Well, and at the last meeting, you discussed whether there should be a differentiation between housing authority and other recipients of public rental assistance. And at the time, you all said you didn't think the distinction should be made, but that's another point to decide and include within this if you'd like.
My feeling would be to include, as we originally proposed, to include things. The only thing is, it seems like we have a harder number from Michael in the 15,000. I don't know what the others might represent in terms of dollars. So it's a little bit of a rule.
He's not going to break the bank with that.
No, he's going to 15, but I'm saying the other possible programs that.
We could ask Jennifer if she's seen any applications that she's had to reject because they were say they were from affordable housing, but not from housing authorities, such as Section 8 vouchers or other fixed voucher developments.
Well, we haven't seen any in Watertown. We have approved 3 Section 8 tenants in the entire Newton program. So that's, 1% of the applicants. So it'll be a small number.
Probably a handful.
Good,
Okay.
good.
All right.
I don't, my opinion, it's not a full roll of the dice by adding MRVP, Section 8, AHVP, whatever the other affordable housing voucher we have out there. It's really not going to be as significant as we think.
Yeah.
Because they're hopefully reaching out to their subsidy partner administrator and getting that adjustment as soon as they can if they've had that loss of income.
So it's more the situation Michael's people have where they've got this gap they just can't cover. But going forward, they're okay. It's the arrears that they can't manage.
This is a detail that I'll talk offline with Larry and maybe Michael about, but the program currently isn't equipped to pay arrearages. So we'll have to figure out if that's going to be a problem, but I don't think we need to get into that as a full group.
I don't think we can handle that tonight.
Well,
Yeah. There are workarounds, I'm sure.
I'll
Can
second
we-
Cliff's motion if that was a motion that Cliff was making.
That was a motion I made in retrospect.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
I seconded it.
Okay, let's vote. Cliff,
I'm in favor.
Helen,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Did I miss someone?
Just you.
Brad,
Me. I'm in favor of it, so it passes. And I hope Larry has that written down so we send it to the town council. Okay, we have,
May I interrupt you, Fred? Steve, do you think it's necessary to go to council on this?
Steve, what do you think?
No, I don't see any reason to.
I'm all in favor or not if we get away with it.
I think the council's already endorsed the policy, to establish a program and use the source of funds. We never said how much or specifics about how to be administered. I think we're fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Good question, Larry. I'm sorry, Fred, can I ask, when someone threw out the May date, what was that tied to when we said, was that applications would be taken as, what, I heard May somewhere.
Right, so.
That was if it's extended to the people that are going through their 3 months already.
Say that again?
That was, people are running out now, I guess the end of December.
Right, but how do you get to May if you add 3 more months?
Right, so the answer is that option assumed that we continue to take applicants through March and extend.
Okay, so it'd be March, April, May?
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
And we'll see this in writing in the minutes from Larry. Can we move on to a quick update on the projects?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is an update on 4 projects that have been approved and under construction. And then I'll throw in 2 more that were approved but have not advanced. So the 4 projects that are on track to deliver units in 2021, first, not in order of delivery, Arsenal Yards, 45 units total. 30 of them are 80% of AMI, 65% of AMI is 15. They're all rental, I think I said. And the regulatory agreement has been executed and they've started to market the units. The lottery is February 17. The AVIR is a total of 8 affordable units. This is the project that we discussed at the last meeting, where phase 1 has been essentially completed, but phase 2 is now under construction. Phase 1 has 5 rental units that are affordable, and 4 of them are at 80% of AMI, 1 of them at 65%. The 3 units that are in phase 2 are the ones that are proposed by the developer to be ownership units. They have just started the process with DHCD to convert to ownership. They have to amend the existing regulatory agreement and then apply anew for the rental ones. There is currently a temporary certificate of occupancy on phase 1, but that should ripen into a full certificate fairly soon. Water Mills is 15 rental affordable units, 10 at 80%, 5 at 65%. And it is very close to getting a temporary CO on the east building. The west building is going to take a little bit longer. They just completed a lottery process in November. So they'll, all the affordable units will be accounted for, fairly soon.
Remind me where that is, Larry?
I'm sorry, what?
Remind me the address of that project?
Yes, 330 and 350 Pleasant.
Yeah.
And then 101 North Beacon is 4 affordable units. They're all condos. They are under construction with a September 21 likely completion date. And the regulatory agreement for that project is still in process. Then the 2 that are have not advanced are 33 Mount Auburn, which was going to be 2 condo units that are affordable, and 166 Main Street, which was going to be 5 rental that would be affordable. Both of them are under a tolling order right now. So even though both of the approvals were longer than a year ago, we're not, at a point where the permits expire. The question for both of them is going to be whether they're going to be able to proceed once the tolling ends.
I'm sorry, what's the tolling thing? I'm not catching it.
Yeah, sure. So in March 2020, Governor Baker issued an emergency order, which amongst other things said that if there were permits that would lapse, that they hold, they were basically frozen in place until a certain number of days. When the emergency lifted, then you start counting again.
I see. I didn't, it broke up a little bit.
Yeah. So that's where we are.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Any comment on this? Okay, do we have any other business?
I hate to add anything. I know we're running late, but I just wanted to go over it's the year end. So I just thought interesting comment. We just had our last board meeting of the year, and we had our tenant selector look at some of our own data here in Watertown, and we saw an increase in family applications from 285 in 2019 to 1866 in 2020. And for the non-emergency families, we had 2784, and now it's over 11,000. So that's a result of the centralized application where they can just click on Watertown Housing and they can select that. And for elderly, it went from 41 for emergencies to 351 this year, and 104 non-emergencies to 2749 this year on non-emergency applicants for elderly. So just to give perspective on this new centralized system, we just created a 10-year backlog in less than a year now with COVID as well. So not great news to end the year on, but we did house a large amount of people this year, so that's good.
So
Michael, just question.
Sure.
Go ahead,
Can I
Cliff.
ask a question? So with the people that are on that emergency list that have gone up by a factor of 10, they're being assisted not just by Watertown, but by presumably any housing authority they checked off the box for. So it's not like this is all your responsibility alone, I assume.
You got it. And so, but they're on the Watertown Housing Authority wait list, and they would technically take a priority over the non-emergency, right? So it's probably not going to be that full 10 years, but that's you say that now, and then that it just keeps growing and growing every year.
But it does sound like unless you're on the emergency list, you're probably never going to be housed.
We're essentially emergency housing now. They might as well, the LHA, the L might as well be an E. Truly, we haven't housed a non-emergency in quite some time. There is talk at the NARA board of directors now to try to push the legislature to allow every 10 or so, every 9 or so, to allow for a local non-emergency, but it offends some fair housing laws. So they would have to change the legislation on this tenant selection for state public housing. But truly different than any other year we've had. even though, again, like you said, they can click on multiple housing authorities, they're still on our wait list. So
can they click all of them, or just is there a certain count that you can click on?
there is no limit as of yet. There is no limit. We are asking for it as a housing authority to limit it to 10, 20, something in their region, be realistic. It's just creating more backlog for everybody instead of just helping the person to find housing, because they're not even going to go to Western Mass if they're in Boston, right? So the thing is, we have to change it through the legislature. So we're going to do sort of all the changes at once when we go to the State House and get this changed eventually.
Right. Well, that's beyond the scope of what we can change.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of year-end numbers from the Public Housing Authority. Just wanted to let the partnership know.
Thanks.
Pretty amazing.
Thank you. Okay, not hearing any other business, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Merry Christmas.
Bye, everybody.
See you on
Thank
the
you
other
all.
side.
Everybody.
Yeah, Merry
Happy
Christmas, Happy New
holidays.
Year, Happy Hanukkah.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody, for all your work this year.